What's going on, everybody? I'm Johnny Brook. Welcome back to another crafted workshop video, and welcome back to my kitchen. So in case you missed last week's video, I installed all of these awesome new cabinets from Lowe's, who is the sponsor of this video and this whole series. And in this video, I'm going to show you how I built these DIY plywood and laminate countertops. I love the way they look, and the best thing about them is they cost less than 300 bucks for this whole kitchen's worth of countertops. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started with the project. So when looking for design inspiration when planning this kitchen project, I kept coming across countertops being made from plywood with a laminate veneer on the top surface. And I noticed a lot of people were leaving those plywood edges exposed, which is a look you'll know that I love if you follow my channel. So I decided to try my hand at building some countertops in this style, and the first step was to pick up a few sheets of 3/4 inch plywood from my local Lowe's store. And I had the sheets ripped to a width of 25.5 inches on the panel saw at the store, which is the final depth of the countertops, and then I could lay out the final length of the pieces once I brought them home. To best hide the seams between the two sections of countertop I'd be building, I figured I could have the two sections meet where our apron front sink would go, since most of this section would end up getting cut out and covered up anyway. After figuring out the length of this section, I cut a piece of plywood to length using my track saw, but a circular saw and straight edge would also work here. I also made sure to cut off the factory edge on both ends of the piece, just to make sure I had as clean of an edge as I could get. On one of these sections, I needed to notch out the area where the countertop met up with the face frame on the wall oven cabinet, and to do this, I marked out the area, cut away the majority of the material with my jigsaw, and then cleaned it up with a rasp. After finishing the cutout, I test fit the piece, and it fit great. The last piece to cut was to fill in the area between the two longer strips, and I once again cut this piece to length using the track saw. Once that piece was cut, I could test fit all of the top pieces, and with the fit confirmed, I could move on to building up the edges of the pieces. And what I mean by building up the edges is that rather than just gluing together two full-size pieces of plywood for the entire countertop, I decided to just add strips around the edges of the top pieces, as well as where the countertops are supported by the cabinets below. And building countertops like this not only saved me a bunch of money on plywood, but it also made the countertops much lighter and easier to handle and install. It also allowed me to better utilize the 4x8 sheets of plywood I used, since those 23-inch wide offcuts wouldn't have been usable for these countertops otherwise. Before adding the strips, I first marked out where the top met up with the cabinets below, and since the strips I used were 3 inches wide, I could really just roughly mark out these locations on the underside of my pieces and work from those marks. Speaking of strips, next I could rip a few of those 23-inch offcuts into a bunch of 3-inch strips at the table saw. I could have also had this done on the panel saw at Lowe's, and that would be a great option if you don't own a table saw. You absolutely do not need a table saw to build countertops like these, as long as you can utilize the panel saw at your local store, plus a circular saw for making the final cuts at home. After ripping some strips, I could start cutting the strips to length, starting with the one mitered cut I needed to do on the outside corner on the right end of my countertops. And by making a mitered cut here, I could make it appear as though these counters were truly 2 layers thick, whereas I would have had an ugly seam if I had just used a butt joint here. After cutting the 2 mitered pieces to length, I attached them to the underside of the countertop using wood glue and a bunch of 1-inch brad nails. And brad nails are a great option here as they have a decent amount of holding power and you don't have to use a ton of clamps to get a tight seam, but you could also use screws if you don't have a brad nailer. That said, if you do have some clamps at your disposal, you might as well use them as they do really help to tighten up those seams. Next, I just continued filling out the edges and center of the countertop, cutting the pieces to length at the miter saw. And these pieces won't be seen in the final countertop, so I wasn't as worried about getting them absolutely perfect. And I just made sure to align the edges as well as I could, and I added filler strips along where I made those marks previously, where the countertop is supported by the cabinets. With that, the first section of countertop was assembled, so I could move on to the L-shaped corner section. And this section required I join 2 top pieces of countertop, so I added strips along the underside of that joint, both perpendicular as well as parallel to the edges of the top. After dry fitting the pieces, I got the countertop assembled in the same way as before, but I unfortunately lost the time lapse of this. But here's how this section looked once it was assembled. And as you can see, I did use some screws here, especially along that seam between those 2 top pieces. And this was partially to add some strength, but the screws also provided more clamping pressure than brad nails would have, and really pulled the pieces into the same plane. So with that, both countertop sections were assembled, so before actually adding the laminate, I wanted to go ahead and do some finish prep on the plywood pieces. I started by filling the tiny gap between the two pieces I had put together for the L-shaped piece, and I used wood filler to fill in this area. I let it dry for a bit and then sanded all of the edges along with the top with 80 grit sandpaper to start to smooth things out. After the initial pass with the sander on the edges, I went back and applied wood filler to all of the visible edges, really putting it on nice and thick. And I wanted these edges to be smooth to the touch, and also any open voids would be areas where water could work its way into later. After letting the wood filler set up, I came back and sanded the edges, working my way up to 180 grit, which left them super smooth with no visible voids. While I had the countertop upside down, I went ahead and added a chamfer to the bottom edge using a trim router, and this will not only help to keep the edges from chipping out, but it'll also make the countertops nicer on the hands. Finally, I sanded the top with 120 grit to really smooth things out, and then I could start working on the laminate. I ordered 2 5x10 sheets of laminate from the Lowe's website for this project, even though I could cover these countertops with 1 sheet, and I ordered 2 since it's so difficult to get a feel for what a color or pattern will look like from a 1-inch square swatch. So both of these sheets were obviously black, with one of them being a more matte finish and the other having a slight texture. And I decided I preferred the matte finish, so I moved ahead with that sheet. Unfortunately, I paid no attention to the orientation of the countertop when rolling out the sheet of matte black laminate, and you'll see that this came back to bite me in a bit. Anyway, to cut the laminate to size, I clamped the sheet in place on top of the countertop with about 2 inches of overhang on the back edges, and then I used a flush trim bit in my trim router to cut the sheet to size. I also made sure to support the offcut in this L-shaped section, as I've had issues with laminate tearing in these types of corners in the past, and overall this worked great, but again, I cut the laminate with the countertop section upside down without thinking about the fact that since this section is L-shaped, it wouldn't match up once the countertop was right side up. After panicking for a minute, I figured I could just change gears and hide a seam underneath the cooktop, which would allow me to use 2 of the cut pieces. And this would still be a little bit more visible in the final counter, but I figured it would be a tight enough seam if I could get the pieces nice and straight. To do this, I used a template bit on my trim router and clamped the 2 adjoining pieces between 2 pieces of plywood, and then routed the edges nice and straight. And this actually worked like a charm and would have been a great option, but unfortunately when I went to move this freshly cut L-shaped section so that I could start adding the contact cement, the corner seam cracked, as I've had problems with before, rendering the piece basically completely useless. I decided to just scrap this matte black piece, saving the offcuts for a future project, and go back to that textured sheet of laminate and start again. And everything worked out smoothly, so I could move on to adding the contact cement. I added the contact cement to the top of the counter, as well as the underside of the laminate, and let it set up for about 30 minutes. And if you've never worked with contact cement, it can be a little bit tricky, as once the 2 pieces touch, they're pretty much bonded for good. So to allow for some positioning of the large piece of laminate on top of the counter, I used some aluminum clamps as spacers, and you could also use dowels here, or I've even seen people use extension cords coiled up on the surface. With the clamps in place, I moved the piece of laminate and got it positioned over the countertop, making sure I had a good overhang on all of the edges. Once the piece was where I wanted it, I started removing the clamps one by one, applying pressure to set the laminate in place as I went. And thankfully this went really smoothly, and I could come back with a pressure roller after removing all of the clamps to permanently bond the pieces. And you might notice that a few areas around the edges were actually lifting slightly, and I think this was because of how cold it was on the day I was applying this laminate. So to help with this, I actually came back with my wife's hairdryer and just added a little bit of heat in those problem areas, which seemed to kind of reactivate the contact cement, and then I could follow it up with more pressure rolling. So once the laminate was applied, I could come back with that same flush trim bit and flush up the edges of the laminate with the plywood, and this is always super satisfying. One tip here is to clean off your bit as you go, as the contact cement has the tendency to kind of gum things up, which will leave you with a less clean edge. I repeated the same process on the other countertop section, using the offcut from the L-shaped section for this, and I was able to cover both of these sections of countertop using 1 5x10 sheet, and I ended up with almost no waste if you don't count that other sheet of laminate, which we're not going to talk about. To finish off the edges, I came back with that chamfer bit, and these laminate edges are extremely sharp after flush trimming, so I definitely recommend doing some kind of edge treatment here, even if it's just filing the edges with a laminate file. After routing, I hit the chamfered area with a sanding block, and then I was ready for finish. So the laminate obviously doesn't need any kind of finish, but I wanted to protect the plywood edges from exposure to water, which they'll obviously see plenty of since this is a kitchen. To keep finish off the laminate, I taped off the edges with some painter's tape, and having a nice sharp edge profile like a chamfer really makes this easy. Next, I could apply some finish, and I used a spar urethane here, which is a marine grade outdoor finish, and this type of finish will stand up really well against water, and I also like the way the finish accentuated the layers in the edges of the plywood. Also, you'll notice that I only focused on the exposed edges here, as all of the edges against the cabinets and wall will be protected with caulk plus a tile backsplash on top of that. After applying 3 coats of finish, I peeled off the tape and the edges were looking really nice. Next, I needed to come up with a way to connect the 2 countertop sections once they were in place in the kitchen. And since most of the area where the countertop sections met would be cut out for the sink, I only had a small potential area to work with here. So I figured a couple of 2.5-inch pocket screws would be perfect, as they really just needed to pull the pieces together before I attached them to the cabinet below. I used a little mini Kreg jig to drill the holes here, and then clamped the pieces together before driving in the screws. With that done, I could work on the handful of other things I needed to do before actually moving the countertops into place, the first of which was cutting the face frame on the sink base to accept the sink I'm using. This is a top mount apron sink from Kohler, which I picked up at Lowe's, and I chose this sink not only because I really liked the way it looked, but I also liked the fact that it being top mounted would limit the water contact with the plywood edges. Once the sink was dry fit and looking good, I could add some blocking in the corners of the cabinets through which I'd run the screws to hold the countertops in place. And this blocking really just helped to keep the screws from pulling this inner structure of the cabinets out of whack, and I tacked them in place with my brad nailer just to keep them from moving around when I dropped the countertops in place. The last thing to add was a little corner support piece where the corner cabinet didn't fully extend into that area, and since I only had 1 stud to hit here, I also added some construction adhesive just to provide some additional holding power. And I also made sure the support was in line with the cabinets using a level. Finally, it was time for the moment of truth, moving the big L-shaped countertop section into place, and thankfully, besides knocking the light fixture out of whack, this went really smoothly and the countertop just dropped into place. Next, I set up my line laser to shoot a line 25 inches from the wall, and then checked the front edge of the 2 sections just to make sure they were in line. And thankfully, with just a tiny bit of tweaking, they were, and my wall was straight enough to not need any scribing on the back edges of the countertops. So with the countertops in their final position, I clamped them down and started adding some 2.5-inch screws up through the blocking that I had added previously. And I used self-tapping screws here and was able to avoid pre-drilling, which was definitely nice considering just how awkward it was to try and add screws inside these cabinets. Once that first section was fixed in place, I went ahead and added those 2 pocket screws from below to join the 2 sections, and I ended up with a really nice flush top. And I actually chamfered one of the edges of this seam just to allow me to add a bead of black silicone caulk later to make sure it was really nicely sealed, considering this is right behind the sink. Next, I just continued working my way around the counter, adding screws through the blocking I added. And one other thing to note here is that I installed my cabinets myself using a line laser, so I was really confident in how flat and level these cabinets were, but you might need to do some shimming if your cabinets aren't as level. And as a testament to this, I checked the counters for flat and level after installation, and they were pretty much dead on. So with that, the counters were in, so next I could get the sink installed to get our kitchen functional again. And this sink comes with a template, but you actually have to cut it out yourself, which I did find kind of frustrating just because it could introduce some more error into this process. Anyway, after cutting out the template, I got some painter's tape added to the areas I'd be cutting, both to help prevent tear out on the laminate, but also to help keep the jigsaw base from scuffing the laminate. Next, I added some layout lines, marking the center of the sink, and then I could trace around the template to figure out where I needed to cut. After double and triple checking that I had laid everything out correctly, I could start cutting the countertop, which was definitely a little bit nerve-wracking. Luckily, most of this cut will be covered by the top-mount sink, but where the sink meets the countertop at the front edge of the counter is actually visible, so I did make sure to really take my time there. I also used a higher tooth count blade on my jigsaw here to leave me with the cleanest cut possible, since that laminate really has a tendency to tear out. Finally, once the opening was cut, I could dry fit the sink, and thankfully it fit pretty much perfectly. So before installing the sink permanently, I needed to add these strips to the inside walls of the sink base, and these will be what the hold down clips that actually anchor the sink in place attach to. And you'll also notice the clamps along the back edge of the opening, and these were just holding the countertop down while the construction adhesive I added in that area dried. And I wasn't able to get screws into this area from below, so I figured a little extra adhesive couldn't hurt. I also decided to go ahead and add the disposal drain before permanently installing the sink, so I worked on that next, first adding some plumber's putty under the drain flange before pressing it into place. Next, I added the rest of the drain assembly, including the fiber gasket, backup flange, and mounting ring on the underside of the drain, and then I tightened it down with the set screws. And after tightening, I cleaned up the excess plumber's putty off camera, and then I could get the plumbing installed. And I basically just replicated what was here before I pulled out the cabinets, with a vent at the top of this stack and a Y coming off for the sink drain. I assembled the pieces with some PVC cement after doing some test fitting, and then installed it under the sink, also adding an escutcheon ring and a bunch of silicone to seal the cabinet while I was at it. And in case you missed the cabinet install video, this sink base is actually made of plastic and is sealed with silicone to prevent damage to the subfloor below in case of leaks. I also added the unit for controlling the push button disposal switch while I was at it, and then I could get the sink installed. So first I added a heavy bead of silicone and then dropped the sink in place, cleaning up any excess silicone while I was at it. To attach the sink, I added the included clips from below, but I did this off camera since it was pretty much impossible to film, and this will also vary depending on the sink you're using. Anyway, once the clips were in, I could add the disposal, which just slips onto that mounting ring that I installed previously. And in retrospect, I definitely should have installed this after installing the faucet, but you live, you learn. Speaking of which, next I could get this really cool touch faucet installed, which was fairly simple but also pretty difficult to film. Once the faucet was installed, I got the disposal drain plumbed up, and then I could test my plumbing for leaks. To do this, I added the drain plug and allowed the sink to fill up about halfway, and then I pulled the plug. And this basically sends as much water as the sink will ever see at one time through the system. And a plumber friend of mine showed me this leak test a while back, and I've always done it when installing sinks since then, and it's always worked great for me.
Whoa, 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 ah, crap.
Unfortunately, I forgot to attach the dishwasher drain hose to the disposal before doing this test, so I had water shooting out of the side of the disposal, and I was certainly thankful to have this waterproof plastic sink base when that happened. Anyway, I got the drain line connected and tested the plumbing again, and everything was leak-free. And here's a look at how all of the plumbing came together in case you have a similar setup under your sink. With that, the sink was done, so next I could get our Samsung induction cooktop installed, which I was super excited about. So first I needed to do some more countertop surgery, cutting another giant hole into the top, and I also had to cut through some of those inner support pieces this time, and I had to pull out the reciprocating saw to do that. Finally, I got the opening cut out and could test fit the cooktop, and thankfully it fit great. Before installing the cooktop permanently, I added this foam gasket material that just helps to keep crud from building up under the edge of the cooktop, and then I could drop it into place and attach it with a few clips from below. And I just wired it up based on the instructions in the manual, and then I could test it out by boiling some water. And you do need to make sure your pans have a magnetic bottom if you want to use them with an induction cooktop like this, but man, is this technology insane. So induction supposedly boils water even faster than gas, and I definitely believe it after testing it out, and it's also way easier to install these cooktops. I also love how easy to clean flat cooktops like this are versus gas stove grates. Anyway, after geeking out over the induction cooktop, I could finish up the countertops by adding some caulk around the edges of the sink, along with the back edges of the countertop. Also, you might be wondering about that island top, and I'm going to cover building that in a separate video considering it was essentially its own project. And if you don't want to miss that video and the rest of this kitchen series, including a video on those floating shelves you can see in this shot, go ahead and get subscribed and ring that little notification bell. Anyway, with the caulk added, I could call these countertops done, and I really love the way they came out, especially considering the fact that they cost less than $300 to build. Also, if you want to tackle a project like this yourself, check out the links to the tools and materials I used in this video, all of which were from Lowe's, who sponsored this video, in the video description below. And last, why not check out this video of mine that YouTube thinks you'll enjoy? Anyway, I think that's going to do it for this one, so thanks for watching y'all, and until next time, happy building.